My name is Valerie Erickson. I'm the creator of the Power Partners Formula. I'm also now the founder and creator of Practivated, our incredible host today. We support practice, donor conversation, and on-demand coaching using an incredible platform. And I'm the host of What the Fundraising. Would love to connect with anybody on LinkedIn if we aren't already connected there. And like so many of you, became an accidental fundraiser. Actually, first as a managing director and then as an executive director. And it was a little bit of a tough go. I call this my impact report fake phase, but I felt this pressure to put up this appearance everywhere like I had it all together, but it was a constant hustle. Honestly, if it was January 12th, I was not one of those people putting in the chat that I was feeling energized and inspired and excited. I was like, I am so exhausted. How am I either going to do what I did last year, because that was really hard, or how am I going to not do what I did last year, but I'm not sure that I know a different way of doing it. And I was definitely filled with a lot of uncertainty, like Jennifer. And what really changed my experience as a fundraiser was getting executive coach certified, trained in habit and behavior design and design thinking. Those frameworks came together and fundamentally changed the way that I fundraised. And that was what was behind my initial program, the Power Partners Formula. And all of those frameworks go into everything that I do, including, of course, building Practivated as well. One of the things that all of my work really focuses on is that donor behavior is a response behavior. And it is primarily a response to us as fundraisers, what we do, what we say, how we interact with donors. And I do not say that you're like, Mallory, we were already feeling pressure and now you're starting us off with this. I actually do not mean this to add additional pressure to this situation. I want you to feel agency. I want you to really understand how much more influence and control you have than you might think you do. And so really, and you're going to see this reflected in the workbook we go through today, really what is so important for you to understand is where you have control over how you spend your time, where you invest your energy, what should you keep and get rid of based on those things for 2026, based on the areas where you do have control. Okay, so that's what we're really going to be focused on you today, either as the fundraiser or as the manager. I have to be honest, I am a little surprised in a good way by the number of positive statements that I heard about 2020, how people are feeling about how last year went. I love those answers. I love that you are here. But I know for a lot of people, 2025 was like very overwhelming, right? There were so many different things coming at us, a million different angles all the time. So if you are feeling scattered and like, I have no idea how I'm going to like sequence or put one foot in front of the other, that's okay, right? That is completely normal. A big reason why that's happening, I want to explain a little bit behind what's behind those feelings, just to ground you down in it before. I promise I have a whole workbook made for you today, but I want to explain a little bit about why that's happening, right? So this is our brain. I won't get too sciencey here, but a lot of time when we're in planning mode, when we are in strategy mode, we are up in our prefrontal cortex, okay, our logical brain. When we go in to take fundraising action, actually a different part of our brain comes online, our back brain, our lizard brain. This is our fight, flight, freeze response, okay? And our lizard brain has two jobs. Its jobs are to make sure you don't die and to conserve as much energy as possible. So it actually turns off creativity or flexibility or collaboration or connection, our ability to connect and build real meaningful relationships when it is online. And fundraising, especially end of year fundraising, often activates our back brain, okay? Because there's a lot of urgency, there's a lot of pressure, there's this time clock. And so it makes perfect sense that our back brain would get activated, right? This is a stress response is a normal and important part of life, okay? We don't want to not feel any stress ever. The problem is when we get locked in on that stress, when our stress becomes chronic stress, when we never leave our lizard brain, when we're still in fight, flight, or freeze on January 12th, and there we are trying to plan for the year ahead. And we're really struggling to do so because we're still feeling that scattered energy. So I want you to give me I call this a fist of five, but I can't see all your hands. So we're going to do numbers in the chat. Between 0 and 5, I kind of want to know where you feel like your nervous system is at today. Okay. I would say, let's say a 0 is like you are calm, cool, and collected. Okay. Cool as a cucumber. 5 is feeling very scattered, maybe a little frazzled, can't believe how many tabs you have open already, even though it's only January 12th. Maybe you're feeling like, oh, wait, I just had a break. Why don't I feel like I just had a break? I saw a few sevens up there. I said 0 to 5. So I'm assuming the sevens are like, we are off your chart, Mallory. But I think it's really important to know, I think it's super important to understand that our nervous system, we have one fully connected nervous system, right? So if you're like, wait a second, I just went on vacation. Why am I feeling this way? It's only one full week in to the year. It's actually not related. Rest is one way that we heal our nervous system, but it's only one. There are a lot of other things we can do to regulate our nervous system on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, that can help us come back into a more regulated state. Okay. And I want to encourage you throughout our, and Jen, I really appreciate what you said, right? She said, work is a 2, living in Minneapolis right now, our hearts are with you, is a 5. And that makes perfect sense. And one of the things that's super important to understand is that your nervous system is there. You actually don't get 2 nervous systems. I wish I could say, Jen, like you can just put on your work nervous system right now and take off that other nervous system. But we have one really connected system. So part of the reason we might be at a 5 right now, it might not necessarily be work related, but it doesn't actually mean that our activation, that part of our lizard brain running the show doesn't impact our inability to find clarity and calm and prioritize things and think through our strategy for 2026. This is why nervous system regulation tools. Also, y'all, I love you so much. I just have the best people and best community. I love what you are doing in the chat right now. Thank you for being you. And I just want to say that, like, that's why nervous system regulation tools are so important, because when we are activated, we lose our capacity for connection and closeness and being able to think about what just happened and the year ahead and all of those things. Okay. So I want to, as we start to go in, I'm going to be using and encouraging you throughout this entire time. If you start to get overwhelmed thinking about something, I want you to use a nervous system regulation technique. You can do deep belly breathing, put your hands on your belly, take a deep breath in through your nose. Make sure that your belly is pushing out. Oftentimes when we're stressed, we're like, I'm going to take a deep breath. But we're still breathing from our chest. This is still lizard brain breathing, okay? Belly breaths is what drops us down into our nervous system. So in through the nose, making sure that your belly is really expanding as you breathe in and you out through the mouth. Maybe you like bilateral tapping, okay? This is what my daughter calls this butterfly hugs. And I really want to encourage you to do these things throughout our time together today as we're working through some of this stuff. If you get activated in any way, I meant to put a slide on here of my daughter Emmy, but the other day we were watching Frozen 2 and she's 6 now, so we haven't been watching a lot of Frozen lately. We've been in K-pop Demon Hunter world. Please send me some love in the chat if you are here with me. But we decided to watch Frozen 2 and we are showing Isla, and we get to this part in Frozen 2, I can't even remember where it was, and Emmy starts using her butterfly hug. And I turned to her and I said, "Are you doing okay, babe?" And she said, yeah, I don't know why I'm scared right now, but I am. And it was such a beautiful moment, because that's exactly what I want you to take away. There might be a moment where you feel activated. You do not need to know why you feel activated to use a nervous system regulation technique. Okay. You do not need to know why you feel activated. Sometimes it's just about, you can give yourself a self hug. That's another way to do it. Some people love tapping. I'm not trained in that, so I don't teach it. But again, deep belly breath. breaths or box breathing. If at any point you need a strategy, throw it in the chat. I heard this news about Golden, by the way, so thank you very much. But I just want to encourage you, it's going to be super important during our time together today that you're like letting your body and your intuition play a part in it. And I'm going to talk you through that as we keep going as well. Okay, so what are we doing today? Our outcomes, right, is that I want you to map some of your 2025 fundraising activities by energy and results. I'm going to give you a framework to do this. And I want you to identify some patterns that maybe you've been too busy to see because you're just in it. And then I'm going to help you make 3 really clear decisions for 2026 based on everything that you are learning here together. So as I mentioned, I made you a workbook. I'm going to give you that workbook in 2 different ways. One way is that you can click on the link that I put inside the chat. And what that is going to do is it's going to get you to a page that looks like this. You're going to click that blue button that says make a copy, and it's going to make a copy of the document, and you'll have your own Google Doc there. And you can put your name at the front if you want, so that everybody has their own. Or if you like Word documents better, you can open the document that's in the chat. Please let me know. And I think Brian, my team, is here to help me with this too, so that I can stay on track. Let us know if you have any trouble accessing either of those documents, but this is the workbook that we're going to be going through together today. So one thing I am going to, I want to make sure that you understand. There are going to be some moments where I ask you to do something. I'm going to give you some time to do it. I'm going to put on my fundraising flow playlist, okay? And but I'm going to ask you to do something maybe faster than you feel like you can do it. You're like, oh, but I'm going to want to analyze blah, 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 blah before I do that. I'm going to ask you to make some decisions based on your gut. Okay, based on your gut. You can go back, you can do the number analysis afterwards, but some of what this practice is about are those quick instincts. When you say, okay, what's the ROI I felt like was on this activity? What's that first number that comes to mind? We know so much more than we give ourselves credit for, okay? We know so much more than we give ourselves credit for. I want you to go with some of those things for the purposes of our time together today, okay? Are you with me? Can you give me a thumbs up? Are you willing to tap in to a little bit more of that, a little less CRM, a little more in your body, because I really want to make sure that we are tapping into stuff that you maybe don't usually have access to. Okay. So if you've heard me talk before about energy leadership, that is not what I am talking about today when I talk about energy. So before we go into how we're rating all of these different things, okay, and I'm going to work through the workbook with you. I want you to understand 4 different types of how we're going to rate fundraising energy, okay, around something. Because it's not just when we think about time, right? A lot of people think about something like this and they're like, well, how much time did that take? That event took a lot of time, okay? But time is actually only one part of the puzzle, right? It's actually 4 types of energy, time being one of them, that go into different fundraising activities. But there's time energy, there's emotional energy, there's decision-making energy, okay? Like if you did not sleep for 4 days, that is a lot of decision-making energy, okay? Even if you only had 3 meetings on the calendar about it. And then coordination energy, like that's like the execution energy side of it, okay? So I'm going to ask you in a moment to put down your 2025 activities into a list. Don't jump ahead, please, because there's a few more things I want to tell you about there. But I'm going to have you put your activities on a list, and then, sorry, we're going to give number values to the amount of energy that each of them took, okay? Before you list, in a moment, I will let you, for those of you who are like my A+ type A folks, you're probably like, okay, I'm going to start typing down my activities. But hold on one second, because I want to make something super clear about this. I am the thing I want you to pay attention to with your energy or with your activity list is what is actually yours to map. Okay. So if you are an ED or you're a development director, or you have organizational decision-making power, your list might be annual gala, major donor program, grant writing, strategy, or, whatever that strategy is, right? Board fundraising engagement, planned giving initiative. Um, those might make sense if you are an ED, a development director, or have organizational decision-making power in the organization. Your activity list might look like that, okay? If you are a frontline fundraiser, a gift officer, a program level staff member, I want you to think in terms of how you execute what you own and where you have choice. Because the last thing I want is for you to get to the end of our time together and be like, oh, but I can't make that decision about this thing, right? I want to make sure that every single person on this call, no matter what position you are in, I want you to walk away with things that you can do immediately and have agency over to change your 2026, okay? So if you're a frontline fundraiser, gift officer, program level staff, I want you to be thinking about how I prepare for donor meetings, maybe my personal stewardship approach with my portfolio, the way we handle post-event follow-up, my system for tracking relationship notes, how I coordinate with program staff for impact stories, whatever it is. But I want you to be thinking about your biggest activities of the year that you own. And you might be somewhere in between those two, right? You might have decision-making power over some larger activities, and then you might have more like personal activities for some of them. That's okay, okay? And again, you're not going to put because you all do way too many things, right? We know this, okay? So you are not going to put down every single activity that you do, but I want you to think about maybe the 8 biggest ones, or the first 8 that come to mind, or maybe 10 if you're already at 10. And I want you to put them down on an activity list, okay? I want you to put them down on an activity list in your document, or you can be working on pen and paper if you're like, I'm just going to use this as a guide, but I'm going to write along the way. You can come back, you can do this for more activities later, but I want you to spend just 3 minutes right now writing your activities. I'm going to play my fundraising flow playlist. There's no K-pop. I'm very sorry, everybody. But can you hear my music, Brian? Everybody? Anybody?
Good vibes, good vibes.
Okay, good vibe. My fundraising flow playlist. I'm gonna have everybody and drop any questions that you have in the chat so that we can answer them as well. But we're just spending 3 minutes writing down our 2025 activities. When you are ready, can you give me a little ready in the chat? Maybe this all like flowed out of you. But in case I'm misjudging time since I can't see you working. Okay. The folks are starting to be ready. Seeing some thumbs up. Okay. All right. So this is a weird thing to do on a webinar format. I'm learning my lesson here. Okay, thank y'all. You're the best. Okay, all right, here we go. All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to now, I'm going to ask you to score energy in these the different types of energy for each activity, okay? So you're going to write activity number 1 at the top here. And then I also want you to circle if you can, or highlight if you're in, your Google Doc version, whatever you want. That was very bright. I apologize, everyone. And then I want you to just write down for each activity, what do you feel like the score was from a time energy, emotional energy, decision-making energy, coordination or execution energy? And again, I don't want you to feel like you need to go to your calendar and figure that out. I want you to go with your gut, okay? And I want you to do this for each activity level. We're going to spend about 10 minutes here, and you're going to score, you're going to give a total energy score for each of these, okay? So you're going to write each activity at the top. Can you give me a thumbs up or that makes sense? If you understand what you're doing next, right? Activity number 1, you'll write them at the top, and then you're going to give a score for each type of energy. If you need to go back because you don't remember what one of those energies, you can just scroll right up to part 1, and I defined each of those energy levels right up here for you. So I'm going to have you go in, give those scores. Ooh, level of control over whether okay, Yvonne, such a good question. Okay. Um, so oh, and sorry. Okay, let me answer Lucy's because it's quick. 10 is like the most energy. 0 is like the least energy. So yes, 10 is the highest score. Very good point. Maybe Brian will add that on this sheet somewhere for me while I answer Yvonne's question. But yes, 10 is like the most energy, and 0 is the least energy. And then Yvonne, I would think about if you're thinking about the activities that you do, or I would think about your piece of the puzzle, right? So if your level of control is on whether or not you do a gala, then gala can be the activity. If your level of control is how you work with the volunteer committee because you manage the volunteer committee for the gala, then the activity would be managing the volunteer committee. So the activity should be related to the actions that you do ideally. And then I still have full control, shared control, or influence how it's done, because there are still some of these things where you might have to be working with your ED on it, or you might be working with somebody else on your team on it, even if it is something you have a high level of influence over. Oh, so, okay, Manisha, such a good point. When I would think about emotional energy here, I would actually think about this this is such a good point. I'm going to actually make this easier for you guys right now. It's my first time. I built this just for today. So I would think about emotional energy being things like dread, worry, actually like taxing emotional energy, because it's too hard to add the positive emotional energy into the matrix. So let's think about this in terms of taxing emotional energy. And then, okay, great. Yeah. And then that'll be easier to like add up the total energy. Oh, my audio is breaking up. Okay. Okay. Wait, not everybody's having. Okay. No, each item is on a score of 1 to 10. So this might be 7. This might be 2. It was pretty like non-stressful. Decision-making energy, everybody was involved with this, even though I was the one ultimately doing it. But, it took me a long time to make a decision because I had to ask this many people. And then I had to bring in, and execution was a lot of energy for me. And think about the team. We don't want to make this overly complicated. So sometimes there might be 2 people's energy in there. We're still going to be able to see patterns, okay? But if you're like, okay, like coordination actually like wasn't that intense here, our goal is to start to see patterns. Okay, the music is interfering. Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. Oh, all right, let's see. Let's see. I paused the music. We've done all the things. So does this make sense? We are talking about just taxing emotional energy. So like how much kind of negative emotional energy it had, how much time it took. Okay, are y'all hearing me better? And then we're adding those up at the bottom. So this would be a 22. Okay. Maybe I'll make sure I've answered all the questions, and then yes, I can add the document link again. One second, here we go. And then I will add the Word document again if you would like that as well. So we're going to go to, for me, it would be 12:05 here. If you're on the East Coast, 3:05. And I don't want you to get too worried about not finishing everything. I'm going to walk you through this exercise. If you go back in and you spend a little bit more time on it later, or you add additional activities and map it, that is okay. Okay. I just want you to have this basic version for right now. Sarah, if you are done with that for all of your activities, but yes, we are going to talk about results produced. That is the next part of it. You're welcome to start to go to that. Yeah, yeah, okay. And folks, you're welcome to tell me in the chat if you're finishing up as well. Again, we are not live in a room where I have a great sense of being able to see you, but okay, thank you, Amber. Okay, all right, finished. Okay, So let's start to talk. If you are still finishing up, that is totally great. Okay. Don't let me rush you too much there. But let me show you what is next. So the next piece here is that we're going to talk about ROI. Now, again, this is something where we could have had a million different ways that we rate ROI, okay? But I want you to think about if you didn't do it on your first way through, I want you to go back to the top of your activity list and I want you to go to the results produced section for each activity. Did you guys do this when you did the full thing, or are you able to go back now? Okay, some of you did it when you did the full thing. Okay, all right. Okay, if you didn't do it when you did the full thing, then I want you to go back and make sure you have the results produced in one thing. Now, again, I understand we could make this matrix the most complicated thing in the entire world, right? You're probably like, wait, Valerie, you should have had a different section for all these different things. And if you want to build that in an Excel document, you'd please be my guest. You totally can. But I actually think that you know more inside of you about some of these things. And what we want is some of that authentic reaction, okay, right now. So if you didn't already do that, make sure you go back through each activity and have the results produced filled out for each one. If you do this with anybody on your team as a manager, one thing I might say is you could, I didn't say that at the beginning, but I sometimes like to have people skip the results produced at the first round. So they're really thinking about energy and the energy between the different activities. And then they go back and think about the results produced. So you can always try that and take it out and have them do it later, especially if you're doing this in like a live in-person workshop. Okay. So if you haven't already done so, make sure that you have the results produced number. And the 10 is um, the best possible thing. Okay. So then I want you to, not the best possible thing, the best results possible, right? 10 is like everything was awesome. Dollars raised, great relationships. There was a system. It built this amazing system, whatever it is. Okay. Then there's two different ways that you can think about these matrices, okay? So I want you to go to take your numbers and start to map them, okay? So in the document, I have one version of the map in here, right? So this is the total energy required is on this axis, and the results produced are on this axis. If you do not have this printed in front of you, just draw it on a piece of paper in front of you. Or if you love Excel and you want to create a matrix here as well, you are totally welcome to. You could put it in Excel cells as well, or just take a piece of paper near you, draw the matrix, and start to put in the activities and how they line up on this matrix. I also wanted to suggest, because I know everybody's brain works a little bit differently here, if this type of graph is not your favorite, you can also use a four quadrant graph, okay? So this would be like energy is here and the ROI, the results produced are here. So these are high energy but high ROI. These are lower energy but high ROI, right? We love these. And then these are low energy but low ROI, and high energy but low ROI is over here. So either way, draw it in front of you or use a Google Sheet, but I want you to map these out and start, as you're putting it on the page, start to notice some patterns, okay? So we're going to take another about 4 minutes now for you to take everything from your worksheet and start to put it onto one of the charts that you're using to map this. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions. I'm going to keep the music off, even though I love that playlist. because so I would still use these as the axes, right? So yeah, that would probably be the halfway point is a great idea for that to be 20, and then still use it as the axis. And yes, that's a great idea. Let me give you my playlist. That means I have to learn how to share a playlist on Spotify. Okay, here we go. Um, Tell me if this works. I hope it does. Okay. Yeah, and then you can play that on your own. Great idea, Mallory. So you can jump in right in there. All right, so we're going to spend the next 3.5 or so minutes, but please tell me if you're all finishing up because you're just the fastest people on the planet. Please let me know and we can move on to the next thing after that. Okay, thank you, Emily. Take about 2 more minutes unless all of y'all tell me that you're already done. You are also welcome as soon as you're done. I'm actually going to let you start to read ahead because I'm just sort of looking at time. But if you start to look ahead in the, for those of you who are finishing, here, let me share my screen again. Um, if you start to look ahead in the workbook, our goal is to start to see some of the patterns here, okay? And some of that we're doing through getting curious about what's showing up where, right? So if you look at your map in whatever format you have it in, and again, this is quick reflections. You do not need to be perfect, thorough, whatever words you want to say here, but what's in your high energy, low results, either quadrant or on the graph that you keep doing anyway. What's in your low energy, high results that doesn't feel like it's being protected in the way that's really beneficial? What patterns do you see about how you spent your energy in 2025? So if you're done with your quadrant, move on. And as you finish your either quadrants or other graph, move on and let's start answering all of the questions in part 5 around patterns. And when you're done, I want to know you're done by you sharing something you noticed or realized or a pattern in the chat. So we'll spend about five-ish minutes here, but when you're done, I want you to tell me in the chat something that you noticed or that came up for you or that you're realizing, and I want you to put it in the chat. Okay, I'm reading all of your comments, which are amazing, you all. So here's some different suggestions I have, okay, about because all of this stuff really matters. So one of the things that you can do, right? The first thing we want to do is like pull out the any patterns, right? So definitely if you realize that every single thing on your list is in high energy, high ROI, the first thing I would say as a coach are we have to find some low energy, high ROI things, right? We have to find, now they might not be as high as the high ROI things, but we have to find some lower energy things that also produce a meaningful ROI for you because nobody can exist in all high energy, high ROI activities, right? So my challenge, if that's what you're starting to see in that list, is what, and this is why it's important to look at the numbers, right? Look at the, because they shouldn't all be the same number, right? The reason why I had you put those numbers first was to look at all the numbers shouldn't be equal, right? I could have just given you this quadrant and said, put them into the quadrant based on where they are. But you have some that are higher energy and higher ROI than others, right? So the questions, what does that mean? They're very close. What does that mean? Okay, if you're finding that yours are very close, your totals are very close, Maya, or even your like small levels are very close. Totals. Okay, so very interesting. Okay, y'all, you're so amazing. Okay, let me give you a few pieces of advice based on the different themes that I saw in here. So if you feel like, and I'll maybe start at a high level, if you feel like your map made really clear to you what are some of the things that there's some stuff that is low ROI, high energy that you can just get off your plate for this year, I want you to start to move on to some of those commitments and next steps around what you're keeping, why it matters, what you're releasing, what might need to be reimagined. Okay. So I want you to think about those things. If you feel like your quadrant really revealed to you some levels of equilibrium there. Okay. Like maybe one of the, okay. So that's what I want you to do if you think that your results show that. If you are in a position where everything is high ROI, high energy, there's two things I want you to do. One thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at your energy levels across all four of the areas. I want you to see something that you could do is you could actually do the same map, but just with time. Okay, just with time. You could also do the same map, but just with emotional energy, right? You could take it one by one because what I would be really curious about is if everything is high ROI, high energy, is what types of energy are high across the board? Is everything high in time energy? Because then you definitely, I cannot invent more time for you, right? If everything is high in emotional energy that's driving everything high, then I actually might recommend that that it might be worth it to invest, and not me, I'm full with one-on-one, so it's not a sales pitch, but it might be worth it to invest if you can in a coach or a coaching program or something like that, because to help you reduce some of that emotional energy and maybe decision making energy. Okay. If you're finding that your decision making energy numbers are really high and it's driving everything high, I would think about what support you might need from a leadership professional development standpoint to bring the decision making energy numbers lower. Okay. If you're finding that coordination energy is extremely high, maybe you want to enter a project management training. Maybe you want to think about how can I iterate on this skill set to help me drive my coordination energy numbers lower. Okay. So if time energy, if everything is equal and high, then prioritization is your challenge. And you have to look at those things and prioritize because we cannot invent more time for you. Okay. So we have to have priorities. And I want to challenge you to still think about what you could potentially release or reimagine to reduce the time energy of those things. Some of you, it might come down to the fact what you said in the chat, that this was a building year. This was a creation year. So you might say, you know what, Mallory, these are really interesting, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my matrix and I'm going to do it based on expected energy for 2026. Maybe you spent this last year building your entire stewardship plan and now it's running. It's a lot of it is up and running and you have the touch points and the project management. So actually you expect that in 2026, that's going to be high ROI and low energy. So maybe the next step for you, if you're one of the folks who mentioned that this was a real building year where you didn't see the ROI of your investments and it was a lot of energy for a lot of things that will have ROI in the future, then my next step for you is actually for you to take the map and do it with your anticipated levels for 2026. And then based on that, you can move into part 5 and part 6 about releasing, because it's about what you're thinking about for the year ahead. Is that a helpful reframe based on some of the things that have been happening in the chat or that y'all have been mentioning in the chat? Okay. Okay. Great. Because yes, not everything, it's such a good point, you guys. Not everything is going to have that ROI in the year. Okay. And so even you saying that is really great, right? It's great for, because that's how your intuition is showing up, or your gut is saying, okay, but that was for a good reason that I invested that time and I invested that energy. So do it based on what you expect for 2026. But here's what I want to challenge you. And I promise you on my end, I will do the webinar again. I want you to do this in a place where you save it, because I think we need to come back at the end of this year and see if it was true, right? Was it really low energy for 2026 and high ROI? Okay, so for anything that you were building last year that you're really starting to roll with this year, let's think about a separate map for all of that. Okay. And then the other thing that I would say is some of what I saw in some of these in some of these comments is that in certain areas it might be yeah, okay, Maya, that's exactly where I was going. So what do we release if everything has high ROI, or do we look at what is the highest in that area and the biggest pain point? Yes. So what I want you to do is yes, okay, everything might have a high ROI, but you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. So that's why I was saying if that's your situation, then prioritization is your challenge and sequencing, okay? So I want you to look at those numbers and I want you to put them in order of highest ROI to lowest ROI. So it's not just everything is high, but here is the absolute highest, okay? And then I want you to look at the lowest group of your high ROI, okay, because everything's high. I want you to look at your lowest group and I want you to challenge yourself there. Which of these things need to be reimagined? Like, okay, Mallory, this, and I'm sure you all could give me one example of this. I want everybody in the chat to give me one example of something that had high ROI, high energy for this year that you know needs to be reimagined for this year, for this coming year. I want this to be one of your commitments, okay? You know there was high ROI, you know that it was high energy, and your commitment is to reimagining it for 2026, okay? Perfect, okay? Great. Okay, so this is one of the commitments that you are making by the end of this call, is that each of these things that you are saying in here is going to be reimagined, because you know it can be, right? The fact that you are writing it this quickly in the chat means that you know this can be addressed, right? It can be reimagined. And then I really, really want to challenge you to figure out something that is on that list that you can release. Now, releasing it, you might say this is reimagining it. Maybe I'm getting a little loosey-goosey with my definitions here, but I really want you to think about one thing that is on that list that you can release to autopilot in some way, okay? High ROI. Now, maybe it's a portion, okay? Maybe, like this goes back to Maya's comment. Maybe you're not going to get rid of your whole annual event, okay? You're like, well, Mallory, I can't release that. It's a huge flagship program, whatever. Okay, then I want you to take this exact same framework and I want you to do it for the activities inside the event, okay? And I want you to figure out what you can release on the activity list inside that macro activity, okay? Because y'all, I love you, but if every single thing is in high energy, high ROI, how are you going to get through 2026? Right? We have to prioritize here. So I want you to then take it down to the next level, and I'll send a follow-up. We'll send a follow-up message with all these next steps really like clearly laid out. But I want you to look then at some of those high ROI, high energy activities, and I want you to get one step lower in looking at how you're spending your energy across them. We have to find something to release inside that activity. That is the commitment that I want you to make, that you are going to release something inside of that activity because there are just too many things. Yes, focus on one-to-many communications. Love that. Yes, yes. Well, Julie, everybody, right, is burning out. It's too many things. And y'all, I know that it feels like you can't say no to anything and that everything is so important, but you are only one person or however many your team is for that activity. We cannot clone ourselves. We cannot make time not a factor. Okay. The only thing, and let me tell you, I'm gonna tell you the gut punch of it all here. Okay. I want you to, I want you to recognize that when you aren't making these decisions, it is jeopardizing your donor relationships because you are keeping yourself in a stress state that then is not allowing you to connect in the way that you want to with your donors. So I really want you to push yourself here, okay? My goals for you, the commitments and the challenges I want you to think for yourself is what is one thing I can release either at a macro activity level or an activity inside one of those macro activities. I want you to think about what is one low energy, high ROI activity that I want to protect at all costs, that I want to make sure, even though it only takes me 30 minutes a week, I don't like thank you calls. I don't ever stop doing it because it actually is a pretty low energy but high ROI activity. Maybe you're like, Mallory, it is not low energy because I'm very nervous for 12 hours before I make those thank you calls. If that is you, you should be talking to us over at Practivated, just saying. But I want you to think about those different components, right? That everybody's different. So the goal is that I want to know your one biggest light bulb. I want you to tell me in the chat, what is your one biggest light bulb from doing this activity? And you have this worksheet, right? So you're not going to figure out every single thing, but what is your biggest light bulb about 2026 based on what you just put together? I want you to tell me in the chat. Okay. Yes. Yes. Donor thank yous. Yes. Delegate and collaborate more. Absolutely. Phone calls. Yes. 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 Oh my gosh. Phone calls, you guys, they require so much less ultimate time because, you're going to leave a bunch of voicemails and stuff like that versus writing 25 emails or sending a quick video message. Yes. I love that. Yes, continue advocating for greater capacity. Yes, please. Yes, keep building the event committee and start handing things over. Yes. Okay, I love this, you guys. Yes, a capacity builder, not a traffic controller. I love that. Okay, so we are going to in our follow-up, we're going to send you all of we are going to send you all of the materials from this call, and I'm going to give you like a little choose your own adventure based on how you ended that section. I'm going to tell you the next thing to do based on what I told you inside this call, right? Maybe you need to go a layer deeper. Maybe you need to look at this, across a particular macro level activity. Maybe you need to have a very hard conversation with yourself about something you are not going to keep doing. All of those things, okay? Depending on where you're at. We have one thing for you on the Practivated side here as well that I just wanted to bring up before you go. So we have a donor. Brian, will you share with them our State of Donor Conversation report? So one of the reasons, this is another tool I think will be really helpful for you as you're going into 2026. So the reason why Practivated exists and how we're helping close the gap on the areas where maybe effort is or where effort is too high because of some of those emotional reasons or even, well, I won't get into it, especially those emotional reasons. Maybe ROI effort is high, ROI is high, and where a lot of that effort is in decision making and in the emotional labor. If that is you, one of the things we've really realized is how you can use conversation practice to help reduce energy in those areas. This is a report based on 360 conversations inside Practivated, but the insights from this report are applicable to everybody, and they will give you insight into some of the things you can do, practice on, focus on in donor conversations, but also in your team management and trainings and support in order to really reduce those energy numbers when it comes to the emotional energy and the decision-making energy, and to help you identify some of the biggest areas. I saw in these comments, y'all, a lot of commitment to your growth, right? To being a better manager, to figuring out a way to build capacity on your team, to advocating in these other ways, okay? And so one of the things that this might help you do is also identify some of those bigger growth areas and what that opportunity could look like in order to shift some of those energy levels there. So highly recommend it. It's free download, State of Donor Conversations. So wild, all of the insight there. But I hope all of you guys took away something really, really valuable today. Lucy, I love that reflection at the end. Some of these energy levels are easier for me to deal with than others, right? High coordination energy doesn't drain me like high decision-making energy does. All of this, y'all, is in an effort to learn more about yourself, about your organization, about what you feel like works and doesn't work, so that you can identify, and I hope you already did already, well, you did the one thing that's going to be reimagined, the thing that you need to protect at all costs, and then one thing you're going to release. And if you're not ready for release yet, because the macro level is too big, then your job is to figure out what activity you are going to release inside that macro activity. But something has to give. Okay, you guys are amazing. The reason our coach inside Practivated is an octopus is because octopus are so brilliant and thoughtful and protective and smart and inventive and curious. And that's what we believe. That's what I believe about fundraisers with every bone. And you still are not 12 people. You might have 8 tentacles like Tivy, but you are not 12 people. And so what I hope you walk away from today with more than anything else is understanding that the activities that you do need to fall into these categories. You cannot do everything at once. Everything cannot be high energy and high ROI. Yes, of course, we'll share the recording with you as well. You can share it with your teams, of course. And if there's anything else that I can do or we can do over Practivated to support you, please do not hesitate to reach out. I hope you're walking away with a lot more clarity for the year ahead, and really appreciate everything you do to move money towards what matters most. So thank you so much for joining us today.